Welcome back to the Two Comma Club podcast. Today, I'm excited to have a great conversation with Draye Redfern. He is the owner of FractionalCMO.com, and he's got a lot of connections in common with me, some great people, and I'm really excited about this episode. So, Draye, if you could tell everyone what you're up to and how it is that you can help or add value to what they have going on, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do it. I'm Draye Redfern. Been in the marketing space for nearly 20 years at this point. I've built and sold multiple companies. We exited one just over 2 years ago to Berkshire Hathaway, an insurance agency, because Berkshire loves insurance. And I've had a full service marketing agency for the last 12 years. In that space, we've helped business influencers that you would have probably heard of. Damon John from Shark Tank, we've helped him. Jay Abraham, Chris Voss, the FBI hostage negotiator, Peter Diamandis, Joe Polish of Genius Network, and a bunch of other people like that. So very, very fortunate to have helped some really, really cool people. In addition to Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who in the process of working together over the last 8 years is one of my best friends. And then I also own fractionalcmo.com. So for the people that don't necessarily want like full service agency work, but they need a lot of help or strategy and like, what are the big boys doing that I can, tap into without having to pay an arm and a leg? That's a service that helps a lot of people that way with the high level strategy and what's working now. Because the reality is, most people need outside marketing help in some capacity. What is working? What's not? What should I be doing? And the only real companies that could afford to probably not do that are Fortune 1000 type companies, big companies where there's a big budget and they can afford to have butts in seats to do these sorts of things. And all of them have agencies of record. And so, we are an agency of record for a publicly traded company as well. And so it's things like that. It's just having outside marketing influences more than the guru who pitches you need to do a VSL. And the webinar guy says, you got to do a webinar. Or the web development guy is going to say, you got to have a new website. A surgeon is going to cut. And so sometimes you need, unbiased opinions as far as what is working, what's not, and what is the best fit for you, not what some guru says.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot to be said about how coming in and actually having a holistic approach and the capacity to diagnose what's actually missing rather than just being like, hey, I have this pre-box solution. This is for you because I said so. It's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but at least we could get the right diagnosis. So, how did you kind of get into the world of entrepreneurship and give me the backstory of like kind of how you grew up and how you fell into all this?
I have had a very unfair advantage
Oh,
for
okay.
most people. My father immigrated to the U.S. Uh, and came, nothing super crazy, but he immigrated from Canada and needed to get out of the cold and was broke living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and caught a bus in December from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where it was minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and found the furthest place south that he could go. And that was Tucson, Arizona, where at that point in time, it was 90 degrees in December. So, it was a 130-degree temperature change from when he got on the bus to off the bus. And eventually from there, ended up playing golf, got a full ride to play golf at University of Arizona. Just lucked into it. I mean, he had some skills. And he eventually pursued an entrepreneurial path. And so I grew up around him growing businesses, buying and selling and, doing these sorts of things. I grew up driving to school every morning with, him in the car, and he was listening to Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and all of the greats like that, all the Nightingale Conant programs. And it wasn't until I was probably 25 or 30 where I truly realized, like, holy smokes, like I had all of these psychological imprints from when I was 3 and 5 years old through the time that I was 16 and I could drive myself, that I didn't really fully truly appreciate. And so there's a lot of things like that. So psychological resilience, I think I got from that. But at the same time, I started working in his businesses at age 12. And so I would see how things were run and see ops and be a part of the marketing, which I now do today for my own things. and be a part of very, very high level conversations that, most teenagers would never have a seat in that room. Most 30 or 40-year-olds would never have a seat in various rooms like that. So I get to see and hear how things were done. And it was very much of the, uh, no nepotism sort of, element where I had to work from the bottom up. So I spent years doing filing and scanning stuff and all of the worst of the worst stuff. But it taught me a lot about entrepreneurship. And so now today, like I run 4 companies. I'm very, very privileged. I have a great life, great family. But it started from a young age, like having a father as an entrepreneur, seeing the highs, and more than anything, seeing the lows, because entrepreneurship is a lot more lows than it is highs for most people. And so how do you psychologically handle that? And like where does the will to keep going and pursuing the endeavor come from? And how do you keep doing that? How do you handle negativity or setback? What is the outlook that you have when things go good? Like do you head down when you win, head up when you lose, sort of thing? And staying humble all the way throughout. So I think that's where most of my entrepreneurial elements came from. And uh, you know it's I feel very privileged to have had those opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. It really highlights the importance of how your environment can have such a profound impact on you, and that's something that we talk about a lot. And I experienced it as well. My father, he has his own company in construction, and in that company, I was able to see how the highs and lows come through that experience. Now, I don't think he was as into the Tony Robbins type stuff as much as I am, but I definitely understand how just simple moments of seeing him transition through those hard times had such a profound impact on me. And I'm sure you could say the same. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those key takeaways that you took from the role model that was your father, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think I think the thing that embodies it the most. There's a quote from Dr. Marshall Goldsmith that says, "You either create and control your environment, or your environment creates and controls you."
Ooh,
And when you're young, you can't control your environment. It's, you have to rely on your parents for that. And I've got 3 kids. And so very aware of this sort of stuff. Um, but as you get older, if you're not controlling your environment, that's the people that you're around, that's the inputs, psychologically, the things that you listen to, that's the food you put in your body, that's the masterminds or the business groups that you're around of, it's the employees that work for you. If you don't control all aspects of that, it's very easy to burn out or get completely overwhelmed. And so no one's perfect at it. I am by far from nowhere near perfect, but it's something that I have framed, blown up really big. We had one of our designers make it. It hangs in my office as like a constant reminder of, you've got to control the aspects that you can control, because there's so many variables that you can't. So if you can control the ones that, if you truly do control the elements that you can control, it gives you a leg up, compared to how most people would probably handle various situations, running out of steam or being burnt out on a Wednesday when, man, there's 2.5 days left in this work week, or dealing with the setbacks, et cetera. So I think it's probably multifaceted, I would say.
yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So let's dive into some more of the internet marketing side of things, and let's talk about how it is that you ended up coming into the business that you're in today, and I guess starting in that entrepreneurial journey. How did you start your first business, and what was it about?
My first business was a financial education company for millennials, and I started this 15 years ago. And the problem was that 15 years ago, millennials didn't have any money. Many still don't. And so it was the right idea, wrong time to a certain degree, as far as product market fit. But I learned a lot in doing it that way, because it was the first like time I hung up my own shingle and really made an effort to do these things on my own. From there, it was like, okay, well, this isn't working. I spent a year doing this, and so I need to probably pivot. And I was a part of other masterminds at that point, and eventually, someone was like, "Hey, I've got this issue that I'm struggling with. Could you help me with this? Do you know anyone who could help me with this?" I was like, "Oh, that's easy." Like I fixed it for them in like 2 hours, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, how much? How much can I pay you for this?" I'm like, I don't know. They're like, "Can I send you 10 grand?" I'm like, Uh, sure. So 10 grand for basically 2 hours worth of work, but it would solved a very high level problem that they couldn't solve themselves or they didn't know how. And that was like the one of the first realizations of, okay, I need to pivot slightly and I'm going to go down this avenue. And, you know, the rest is sort of history to a certain degree. Now, multiple companies in the marketing space, et cetera. But it's really like we all fall in love with our ideas and we think that our glop is the best glop. And, you know, whatever it is that you're selling, a product, a service, an e-com, a drop shipping, whatever it is. And the reality is like the market, you know, the market will dictate what they want. You have to be able to pivot, not be emotionally attached to some of those things in order to keep going down that path. So that's how I started in it. And then it's been just iterations on iterations from that, I would say.
That's awesome. I love that. So, when you got into your first business and you had that amazing experience that kind of showed you that there's like another tier to the game of business, which is something that I think is one of the most hidden gems that people are not talking about as much. I think the first person that I've heard talk about it is Alex Hermosi in one of his shorts that I watched. And the idea is like, if you want to basically, get wealthy in your business, what you need to do is you need to solve the problems of rich people, right? And things of that nature. And so, with that being
Totally
said,
agree. Like one of the not one of the and it's not meant to sound like egotistical. This is not meant to sound anything because um, I think you either charge full price for something or you completely give it away for free. And I give so much stuff away for free. I give my time away. I help a lot of entrepreneurs, all of that. But in my companies, we typically have a like don't sell to broke people rule. Not because, you know, it's, you know, anything bad or negative. It's a more significantly more difficult sales process, and if there's no, if you can help them and like have the best service, but if they don't have the money to pay you, you're not going to be in business for very long. And at the end of the day, you have to run a business, not a charity, if you want to have any depth of like or length of time that you're going to be around. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. Is like sell to rich people, and then the profits and all the things that you generate from that, give it away, go help people, give your time back. And that's much of my philosophy as far as how we operate. So I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
I love that. I think there's a lot to be said about it too, because I have this theory. I don't know. I might be able to say it better in the future, but right now the way it is just like anybody who's on their entrepreneurial journey, right? There's basically just call it 20 skill sets that you have to master or you have to hire out, right? And what ends up happening is with those first 10 skill sets that you have to adopt, before you get to the 10th one, you haven't even made your first dollar. Then you master those 10 skill sets and you make a dollar. The next one you make 10, then 100, then 1,000, 10,000, 100, so on. And it compounds in that respect. So by trying to, like you said, charge the people who are in that beginning phase, it makes it very difficult for them to acquire the skills they need to acquire to get to a point where it can actually have the results that it's supposed to have. And if you create resources that are free, as you say, like that ends up being a huge impact for them. So that's awesome, and I respect that greatly. Um, so talking about your business and some of the strategies you had, what is it that you were doing to get discovered in the internet marketing space? If you want to save time on watching all the episodes, but still get all the gold nuggets that we find from interviewing these 7, 8, and 9 figure entrepreneurs, then you can get all of that inside of the 2 Comma Club newsletter. Just go to 2ccnewsletter.com and subscribe.
Giving things away for free, like the easiest answer. I lead with value in most things. Like I said, like I genuinely try to help as many people as possible. But we've done a lot of cool things for a lot of cool people, and it's a domino effect. It doesn't all happen immediately overnight. Like one domino, you know, the whole a small domino can knock over a domino twice its size, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So things, you know, I'll use an example that I can talk about because we have NDAs with all of our clients. But Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote an article on Forbes about me, and he called it the Draye Redfern effect. And essentially, like I met him in 2017 and he had given a talk about how he was generating 30,000 new opt-ins a month without paying for it using medium.com at the time, which now it doesn't work the same that it did then. And so I asked him, like, how are you monetizing this? And he's like, I'm not. And I was like, okay, I got this. Like, let me set this up for you. And so he's built him a sort of, you know, very simple funnel, two-step, with a, you know, an upsell or something that had to, I don't know, it's like nearly 10 years ago at this point. And that was making him very shortly thereafter $10,000 a month without doing anything. And so I was like, "Hey, here you go, my gift to you." And then immediately after that, like, this is working and it's making money. What else can you do? And then we began to do a bunch of launches together and a whole bunch of other things. And we've been, really, really great friends for 8 years at this point. And his new book that doesn't come out for 6 months, I've read it, and it's things like that, like a depth of a relationship that maybe only six people have read it before it goes to the publisher even. So there's a depth to relationships like that that obviously take time to unfold. But most of my relationships start with giving first, especially for the right type of person. You can't just give and give and give and give and not get anything back. But I really believe in transformational relationships, not transactional. Most people, how they operate their business, are very transactional. I will do this and you give me money. I will do this and you give me money. Whereas, like, I try to find depth with people of substance. What can I do for them? And if you ask somebody out there, like, someone of substance, someone who has a big personality brand, something like this, they're like, you can't ask them, "What can I do for you? How can I add value to you?" Because they're like, I'm good. Like, I don't know. I'm good. Thanks. It's finding things that you could actually do where, like, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know I needed this. Things like that where you can give in that fashion. And then, as Dr. Robert Cialdini says, like, in his book, Influence and Persuasion, there's a level of reciprocity that gets induced as a result of that. So I did this thing for Ben. Maybe it took me 4 or 5 hours. And as a result of that, I've had an 8-year friendship. He stays at my house several times a year. We work together. We whiteboard down in our office, and I've literally made him millions and millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, and we've made millions of dollars as a result. But it started with giving and doing something up front that is not necessarily transactional. It's finding the right relationships where you can create transformational relationships, not just dollar for time sort of transactions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot to be said about that. Highlighting the differences between transactional relationships and transformational relationships. I love that idea. Um, a lot of a lot of people in this space when they're first starting out, I find, are very transactional. Maybe they've taken the leap of faith into entrepreneurship. They have a very little runway of savings that they have, and then they're trying to like jump in and make their first dollar right away. And in that, it sets them up for failure to be transactional because they're like, oh, I have to get this money rather than like being able to actually build a genuine relationship. So I don't know if you have any insights or advice for people who may be in that position, experiencing one of the lows of entrepreneurship, but to help them not fall into the trap that is being a transactional entrepreneur.
It's such a fine line. Like, I mean, you can't, like, don't get me wrong, not all of our relationships that we work with across the companies are creating depth and they're staying at my house and all of these sorts of, like, you just can't grow businesses if that's the only, modus operandi. However, it is an underpinning of how we do everything. So we also have, no asshole clauses. Like, if someone is not enjoyable to be around, uh, I don't want them as a client. I don't need, like, don't get me wrong. I have a very expensive team. We've got 30 something people on staff and payroll. At least in just one of the companies. Like, my overhead is significantly high. However, I don't need a client as much as I need the respect of my team and not dealing with bad or negative people. And so for me, it's one of these things of, um, I will, even if it's, you pay us this amount of money per month and we'll do this job, I'll create depth in the relationship in some form or fashion. I'll hop on, like, I don't do client calls anymore, just too busy. But I'll hop on a call here or there. If I'm in town, I travel a ton, like 140 days or something last year. If I'm in town, I'll make sure I can take them out to dinner. When they onboard, we get as much information as they can, so I know their birthday, their kids' birthdays. Oftentimes, I'll do personalized things for them, where, like John Rulin, who unfortunately passed away last year, wrote an amazing book, Giftology, and was a friend. And so we do a lot of John's sort of strategies where we'll send them a cutting board engraved with their surname, like their last name, for a 4th of July. Like, hey, happy 4th of July, grilling out. And things like that end up staying, in the family for years, where the wife is pulling it out and she's chopping onions 2 years later, and she's thinking of me, of something that I did. And if you win the wife over, you win the significant other, the husband over, whatever it is. And so there's things like that. Like, don't just make it dollar for time or whatever it is. Like, what are the other things that they have? Are they married? Do they have kids? What is going, like, just looking at relationships much more holistically, I would say. Um, and that's, there's no exact strategy. Every person's different. So every sort of way that you handle it's different. But at least being open. I think one of the best things that people can do is having an onboard questionnaire for people where you learn about the clients you start working with. What is their drink preference? What do they like? Do they like a bourbon? Do they not drink? Are they, Mormon, where they're not going to drink coffee or tea or alcohol? If so, don't send them wine for Christmas. Like things like this that just, make a difference as far as creating depth in the relationship, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I like that tidbit there about getting that information to that detail, because that really goes to show, first and foremost, if somebody sent me something like that, it's like, okay, this person like actually cares. Like they're taking the time to get to know me at a very deep personal level, rather than just, I'm one of the many contacts out there. So that's a really cool idea, and I think I'm going to implement that. So thank you for that gold nugget.
Totally.
With that said, what have been some of the experiences that you've had with the relationships that you've built that have been good but not great, and then managing those in a way where you've been able to, uh, you know, essentially get those people out of your life, the ones that are the problem children in your business, if you will.
Oh, I, if I when I figure it out, I'll let you know. Uh,
I love that.
no, I mean, there's no, you have clients. So we fired 3 or 4 clients last year. They're just demanding. Like, if you make someone on my team cry, and I got a pretty like tough, resilient team, it's an absolute non-starter. You're gone. Like things like that. In regards to people on team, like 2.5 years ago, I had to fire my director of operations. One of the more difficult things that I had to do, but she was an absolute cancer to the organization, and that was so tough. And it took basically 8 months to recover, because when she left, my head of sales left, one of our chief copywriters left, one of our project managers left, because they were all sort of like a clique, if you will. And it took 8 months to recover from that. But it was 8 months of recovery, or like an indefinite amount of time of misery, and way bigger now, way stronger as a result of it. So it's doing the hard things. It's having, like the book, the crucial conversations, doing the things that are difficult, that maybe, you may have to trudge, uphill in the rain for a little while as a result of it. But once you get to, a place where you've gotten through it, it makes it way easier, way better, way more efficient, way more enjoyable. Because like entrepreneurship is hard enough as it is. All of the risk that we take, and we're psychologically wired differently. One of the book, Dr. Brackman wrote a book called Driven, talking about the D2, D4 receptors in our brain, where we, like, entrepreneurs are, they are wired differently in their brain psychologically, and how they handle these sorts of things. That doesn't make it any easier. It just means we're more accepting of risk and things like that. However, we're still emotional beings. We still have logic and emotion to sort of play with in one side or the other. And it's one of these elements where, um, like I said earlier, the Dr. Marshall Goldsmith quote, you either create and control your environment, or your environment creates and controls you. And so if you're not controlling those people, then, like, and getting rid of them if they're not serving you, helping you, aligned with your mission, and they're cancers in your organization, or whatever the scenario is, um, then you are doing yourself a disservice, and making the entrepreneurship journey even more difficult than it needs to be in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. It reminds me of that saying. It's like hire slow and fire fast, and being keenly aware of that.
And
Um,
I've known that for 20 years, and until I sort of just had my team do it for me, I would, hire fast and fire very, very slow. So it is one of my weaknesses. So my team handles all of that for me. To your point, because it's a weakness, I know it's a weakness of mine. So I just choose not to do it, and the company's way better for it.
yeah, I totally understand that. It's good to know your strengths and weaknesses, because then you can build a team that has the strengths to match your weaknesses, which is part of how you have to be humble in business to be able to understand hey, these are my pitfalls, and like I could put in all the time and energy to try to improve, but I'm only going to get so much better versus having somebody that I can actually offset this to, which makes me think of the book Who Not How that Benjamin Hardy wrote. Great book. So on the topic of books, what books would you recommend people read, given all of your entrepreneurial experience and everything, that would help curate an environment to make them successful?
Um, 10x is easier than 2x. Ben Hardy's book. That's one. Who Not How's probably another. And then from there, it's a mixture of so many different things. I don't think entrepreneurship is a box, like a static box. For me, the book that I probably quote the most is Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this goes back to the whole relationship thing I was talking about earlier. One of my favorite quotes from that book, and it's been, amalgamated in a bunch of different, sayings, is that the sweetest sound to someone's ears is the sound of their own name. And so I try to use it. Like when we onboard, someone onboards to Redfern Media, we make a personalized page for them. It says their name at the top of it. There's a video saying, "Hey, Bill, Draye Redfern here, da 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 da," whatever else. So it's hyper personalized so that like it makes a difference, because everyone else is like, "Here's your DocuSign, here's your Stripe link. Thanks, have a nice day, pay me, deuces." And so it's things like that. So that book I reference a lot. Napoleon Hill's, all of his stuff is good. Tony Robbins is good. Joe Polish's book, What's in It for Them, I love. It's very in line with my philosophy. But I could probably name 100 books. I think I've read over 1,200 books at this point.
Hmm.
But those are some of the ones that typically stand out.
Definitely. I'd like to also ask you about your book. I believe I saw that you have one on Instagram. If you wouldn't mind kind of sharing a little bit about that. I understand. First of all, I want to preface this. You mentioned at the beginning that the first company you made was one around financial education, and that's something that I care about a lot. And have a finance degree, and I actually had a great conversation with Storm Leroy yesterday, doing this podcast as well. And I mean, it was just it was amazing talking about that stuff. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on I believe it's recession proofing, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah, the
so,
Recession Survival Guide. So that's my third book. Working on the fourth one right now, and I love books. Books are a phenomenal way to generate authority in a space. The first book, you can't buy it anywhere. It was literally a book that I wrote where I would speak to one of the niches that we work in, and I would quote unquote buy it. So if I got hired to speak, I would say, okay, for this fee, I will also personally buy a copy of this book for every one of your attendees. And it was on the seat of all of the people sitting in the room, so that I look good to the event promoter. My book, which is basically a long form sales letter, is sitting in front of everyone in the room. So that's a strategy. Second book, excuse me, was for one of the other niches that we're in. And Recession Survival Guide was essentially more of a mass market approach of what was going on over the last 3 or 4 years, of how to avoid more or less a recession. Now, the Fed ended up printing some money, trying to stave off a recession. I'm still not entirely sure that we're going to get out of it unscathed, because on average, a recession happens every 11 years and a depression happens every 100. And so we had a brief, like 1 month dip of a recession in 2020. And the Great Depression was 100 years ago. So we're due for both, either a depression or a recession. So that book was largely geared around, like, what are the frameworks that you need? What are the offers that you need to have? What is the structure in the business that you need to operate from to survive economic downturns? Because, like the Warren Buffett quote, no one knows who's swimming naked until the tide rolls out. And but it's been really great for a lot of business owners in the last 5 years. Money's been flowing, but we're seeing a tightening, even with Trump in office and some of the economic stuff, and people are excited. But we're still seeing a tightening that's occurring to a certain degree. So being financially, economically, commercially resilient in how you operate the business, as a frame, a sort of reference. So yeah, that is the Recession Survival Guide. You can get it on Amazon or wherever else. But I love books. It's a huge credibility piece, because you hand someone or meet them at an event or networking, whatever else. You give them a business card. That business card's probably going to end up in the cup holder in their car, or it's going to get lost somewhere. It's going to get thrown away. It's meaningless. Whereas if you hand someone a book, it's this absolute stigma around throwing books away, like whole burning books, from the World War II side of things. There's just a very, very negative stigma on throwing them away. So the staying power is so huge. Like I've had clients come to work with us for years after I initially gave them a book. They're like, I've been meaning to hire you, but I was doing this and I was doing that and I was doing this. And like finally I just pulled the trigger and I'm gonna do it. And that was like a 4-year tail on something is that a business card will never have, a VSL won't necessarily have because things change so much. So I'm a huge proponent of things like that. Even if the idea, like, I don't care if my book sells one copy on Amazon or 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies. It's not the purpose of the book. The only real, having been under the publishing hood with a lot of big name clients, the only people who really make money from books are like the, Kardashians or the Obamas. Like other people can make a little bit of money. Books, if you're a business owner, serve as a mechanism to control back end awareness and profits to give you more credibility. So I could, huge fan of the whole book as a marketing strategy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot to be said about making yourself the expert, being able to show value to people, and all of those credibility elements that you're talking about. Um, so, to transition from the conversation of nurturing relationships, let's talk about what it is that you do in your agency business. So, in terms of the offers and services that you provide in that, could you elaborate on those a little bit?
Yeah. So the agency side, Redfern Media, we have sort of two niches. One is personality brands. So some of the people like the names that I mentioned earlier, and the other is financial advisors. And a lot of financial advisors are they view themselves as their own little personality brand. But early on, we were the agency to everybody. Like, yes, we'll take that. And yes, we take, because I had to make payroll and things like most people. But as much as I fought it, of like round peg, square hole, I'll figure this out when no one else could do it, stubbornness, the riches are in the niches, the old saying, and it's so dang true. As much as I can't stand even saying it sometimes, it's hyper accurate. So we doubled down on all of that probably about 2 years ago or so. And we do things probably more different than most. Most agencies will be like I said earlier, a surgeon's going to cut. You need a VSL, so we'll build you the VSL. Maybe you need a VSL. Maybe you need a webinar. Maybe you need to do direct mail. I'm a huge proponent of direct mail. Like it's one of my favorites. Do things that other people are not doing. And if you do that, you'll usually have, different or more positive results. So we look at things way more comprehensively, from top of funnel attribution. Where does the first click come from, to where does the purchase or the sign up occur, all the way to back end retention, because it's, between 5 and 25 times more expensive to get a new client as it is to simply retain an existing one. But that's not sexy. So none of the gurus talk about that. It's not like you're going to show up to your next mastermind meeting and be like, my retention is into 95%. It's like, no one cares. They're all like, I got 5,000 new leads this month. I'm crushing. And so there's a huge like dichotomy as far as I think the business minds that are sitting out there. So we look at it way more comprehensively. Like, yeah, you do need leads, 100%, but also how can you keep those people around? How can you offer a higher level service, a better service? How can you create recurring revenue, or at least at a bare minimum, higher retention, to keep them coming back in some form or fashion, whatever that may be. So we've got a framework that we use called Anchor that really sort of outlines that for a lot of our clients, but way more holistically. And frankly, most business owners don't know what's working in their business and what's not. They have no real eyes. They're relying on a vendor or maybe their marketing admin who they're paying $45,000 a year and just graduated from college, 6 months ago with a marketing degree. But that doesn't mean that that person has any real idea of what is the attribution, first click, last click, what is it, what is actual CPA, cost per acquisition, across all of the channels, things like this. So looking at it way more comprehensively is typically how we handle things. And then from there, do you need ads? Cool. We'll run the ads for you. I mean, our media buyers have done over 9 figures in spend across platforms. Do you need VSLs or webinars? Like, do you need a direct mail to a sales page? Whatever the next recommendation is after that. But you got to be able to take a step back and look at the problem as a whole, in order to actually figure out what the best marketing options are for that particular person.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. I am interested to hear about this anchor framework that you're talking about, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, sure. So Anchor is attract, nurture, convert, humanize, optimize, and retain and recurring revenue. So attract, we've boiled it down, and there's 25 ways that you can attract new leads to your business, and then of that, there's breakdowns in some of those. So like client, like authority building, books would fall under that. Book is not a lead generation strategy. So that's attract, nurture. Most people don't nurture. That's just the reality. Like you opt into my email list and then I send you sales emails every week, like go buy my glop every week until you unsubscribe. Um, that is like for most people, that's as good as it gets. So we have a lot of our clients build out 52-week long email sequences where it's actual value being added for 52 weeks, an entire year, and then trigger it at the end with a tag to begin them back at the beginning of it. Because do you remember an email that you got a year ago? Nah, like nobody does. So it can run in perpetuity without you having to stress on like a Monday morning, like, oh, this thing should have gone out this morning or whatever it is, and like having to stress about an email. Do the thing once. We call them singular actions. What can you do once that, like a stock with a dividend, what can I invest in once today and keep getting rewards or returns on that in perpetuity? What dividend pays out quarterly, whatever else, a singular action can pay you out indefinitely. So doing things like that on the nurture side of things. Convert. How are you actually converting? A lot of times we see, having been under the hood of a lot of businesses, they think that a lot of their leads are coming from this source, but they're actually coming from this source. Their conversions aren't fully optimized. There's leaky holes in that bucket, whether it's sales team, marketing to sales handoff, um, you know, uh, book call booking, page, optimization. It could be any of those things to increase your conversions. H is the humanize, where most relationships these days, especially AI, and I love AI, don't get me wrong, I use AI to do humanize things, but it's so, hello, contact, first name. I'm really excited to share this with you, and I've been holding it back, like whatever fake BS it is. The buyers are so much more sophisticated these days than they were 2 and 5 years ago. AI has like really ramped that up with a lot of buyers. So how can you create genuine, not B2B interactions, business to business, not B2C interactions, business to consumer, but H to H interactions, like human to human? How can I, because at the end of the day, if I'm selling B2B, there's still a human making a decision. B2C, obviously a human. So how can I create some sort of humanized interactions with you? It doesn't have to be a monetary thing, but what can I do there to deepen that relationship? Because the deeper the relationship, the greater the retention, etc. O is optimize. Most business owners really have no idea about their metrics. They don't know what is working and what's not. So they just keep throwing stuff at the wall and hoping for the best. And then if something is working, they tend to stop it because, like, I don't know if it's working or not. So let's just turn that off and we'll leave that running. And then they wake up in 6 months from now with like the house on fire, being like, we have no leads. Like, what are we going to do? So really knowing what the numbers are. We pay for a lot of really high-end advanced tracking softwares that do these sorts of things for our clients, but you've got to have a pulse on what is actually working and what's not. Kill the stuff that's not working and do more of the stuff that is. Because most entrepreneurs, and I'm so guilty of this myself, shiny object syndrome. Let's go do that. Let's go do that. Let's go do this. And like it just adds more irons to the fire when you may not even need it. Just do more of what's working if you could actually support it with the data. And then the final is retention and recurring revenue. I mentioned earlier, like we sold a business to Berkshire Hathaway. It was an insurance business. And insurance is amazing because it has retention built into it. It has recurring revenue built into it. If you ever want to sell a business, having like very, very high retention or especially recurring revenue, you get a much higher multiple on the business when you choose to sell it. And so everything I do builds that in. So like all of our models build in recurring revenue because I don't want to have to go hunting. Again, back to the whole Doug Brackman thing, the book Driven. There's hunters and there's farmers. And most employees are very much farmer like. They want to go, plant some seeds and tend to the crops and then get something, a consistent thing. Hunting, way more like feast to famine, big game, and then you may not catch anything sort of thing. My methodology is sort of like merge those together. Like I want to create the relationships and the nurtures and things that can have long term, have my monthly payroll covered before the month even starts, but then be able to go whale hunting and go after the big fish, the big game that allow me to like create big wins. And so it's a mixture of that on the retention and recurring revenue side of how can you actually create a business and an offer that supports you, supports the lifestyle where you're not having to like, I need 25 leads or new sales this month. Otherwise, I'm in the red and the business is going under. That is an awful place to make decisions from. It's hyper emotional and you don't make logical decisions. And so, how can you create the bounds or the boundaries that you operate inside of with higher levels of retention and recurring revenue? So, there's a bunch of ways. I mean, I could spend like 10 hours just talking about that. But that's the anchor framework. And so we go section by section with a lot of our clients to help them build these things out. Or on the fractionalcmo.com side of things, coaching them on what to do themselves so that they have, a much more sustainable, scalable business.
Yeah. I love that you have recurring revenue as one of those foundational pieces of it because to me, any business without that is just a liability waiting to happen, in my opinion. It's like you need that, right? It's the blood flow to your business, in my opinion, because when those droughts come, like that's what you're relying on. So I couldn't endorse that anymore. With that said, I am interested to understand. You touched on metrics and things of that nature, and a lot of people that we've had on here they glaze over it, but I'd love to hear you actually dive into it and like talk about what are some of those metrics that you look for and that you have your clients look for and really focus on, and then ultimately like what do they mean and how do you read them?
There's this is another one we could spend like forever on. Every metric is going to be different for every business. So again, like guru's gonna guru sort of thing. They're going to tell you their exact shtick, and that's just not the reality for most businesses. Like a financial advisor has very different metrics. Retention for them is key because they may only get 10 clients a year, but if I can keep 99% of them, business is going up and to the right. And so everyone is going to be different. It also depends on what is being sold, what the offer is, et cetera. Like we did a consult for a client yesterday. It was takes about a month to compile all the information, then about 4 hours to read it out of like, here's the findings. And so I'll use like that as an example. This particular person is selling a $250 book. Uh, Freaking incredible piece of art, business book, absolutely amazing. Really, really cool. But the problem is that their CPA, their cost per acquisition, was about $200, maybe a little bit less than that, on a $250 book. But when you figure in your COGS, your cost of goods sold, plus admin, fulfillment, and all of the other sort of stuff, they were losing money. So when they look at it like at the high level, hey, we're crushing it. But when you really break it down further than that, they were losing money, and like maybe that could go on for 2 or 3 more months before there was an issue. So for things like that in that business, it's what is the CPM, cost per thousand impressions, because they're running everything via paid media. After CPM, what is the like add to cart percentage, because they're using a Shopify platform. So how many of the people who visit the page are adding that product to the cart? From there, after the cart, it is how many people actually check out. From there, it is how many people take the upsell in order to actually liquidate the traffic costs, et cetera. And then from there, I think there's like a few other metrics. That's an example. For something like a more of like info marketing business, what is time to close? That's one that most people never talk about. So from lead to close, what is that average duration? And so most people like, I want them to click today, buy today, and like never talk to them again, and I'm good. I'm on to the next one. The reality, that's not a very healthy business, because I want to be able to know if I get you in or at least pique your interest. And of course, I'm going to skim some people off today where I'm going to get the sales that occur on day one or whatever it is. But I want to see, time to close in the like 90-day range, maybe even 120-day range as an average on a bell curve, because then I know like we're building rapport. The nurture element is actually holding the weight. So we're getting people on the list. We have leads, we have buyers, and it's way more holistically than just leads to sale today. Thank you. Have a nice one. And so it's things like that, like another example with that. The other one is like I mentioned retention, but I also want to know upfront, what are the leads that came in and what were the sources of those leads and how many of those lead sources actually then converted to sales. And most people cannot get that granular with their business. And that's just the reality of it. And I don't care if I have to pay a little bit more for a direct mail lead than I do, or a direct mail sale than I do Facebook or some sort of SEM, search engine marketing, paid ads sort of thing. Because typically, across many of the clients we work with, a direct mail lead may cost more upfront, but the retention is way higher on the back end, or the recurring revenue is way higher. Again, I care more about that sort of stuff, but people aren't looking for it. So it's hard to give a specific answer like these 6 things are all you need to actually do, because every business is going to be different: lead flow, lead sources, time to close, etc. But at least that gives like a couple maybe additional metrics that people may not necessarily be tracking, that they could at least add an extra arrow to their quiver.
Yeah, definitely. I think that those are some really great examples that you provided there. So thank you for that.
Totally.
Um, in terms of your entrepreneurial journey, tell me a little bit about your mindset around having dealt with some of the lows of the journey and how it is that you were able to overcome those kinds of things.
There's a piece of art that I think describes it very, very accurately. Can you cuss on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So there's a piece of art that was done, and it hangs in Genius Network, which is a mastermind group that I've been a part of for a decade plus. And this piece of art was done by a company called Gaping Void. And most people have probably seen Gaping Void stuff in some capacity. If you follow Seth Godin, the illustrator of all of Seth Godin's books, with like The Dip and Purple Cow and all of the other sort of things like that, was done up by a guy named Hugh McLeod. And so Gaping Void and Hugh have this piece of art that sits in the Genius Network offices, that said, it has all of these little sort of character figures, whatever else, down the thing, and it says entrepreneurship is like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh yay, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. And that to me is the perfect embodiment of what entrepreneurship is like. It's like, you know what? Just get used to
Definitely.
getting punched in the face, and like that's just part of it. You signed up for it. This is what it is. And then you get the oh yay, and that keeps you going for a bit longer. And it's just stacking that, and it's just building it, and having some more resilience that goes on as time goes on. But like that is literally, like, I think the perfect embodiment of what entrepreneurship is really like.
Definitely. Definitely. I couldn't agree anymore. That reminds me of a quote that I saw from Andy Frisella, and it was talking about how entrepreneurship 90% of the time is just getting your teeth kicked in, 8% of the time you're confused, and then 2% of the time you're actually winning. And by the time that you realize that you're winning, you're back in the 90%. And it's just rinse and repeat. And I think that artwork that you're talking about, that is just pure gold.
Yep.
Awesome. So, as we're getting close to the end of this podcast here, how do you want to have people connect with you or get involved in the things that you have if they want to reach out and do that?
Yeah, I mean, I am not super active on the socials. I've built the businesses without necessarily doing that. We'll do more of it over the coming year. But I think that where we have the most resources for people, like free stuff that they can use, I think if you go to fractionalcmo.com, there is a score that, like a scoring, platform that we've basically pieced together, where you go there, spend between 5 and 10 minutes filling these questions out, and we'll instantly generate an 11-page report for you, where people can know exactly what's wrong with their business using the anchor framework: attract, nurture, convert, humanize, optimize, retain, and then the individualized recommendations for their specific needs. So if you need help with nurture, or you're middle of the road on it, or you need a lot of help, these are the exact things that you should be doing. So it's completely free. We probably should charge for it, but we're not, because it sort of, it's just my way of helping a lot of people. I'd say that's probably one of the easiest free ways that people can have some sort of value, and walk away with something. Because most times it's like, download my 6-page PDF guide, and it's like regurgitated same stuff that everyone else has. So that's probably the thing I would say that would be help the most amount of people, completely free, that they could use.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And for anybody who's listening, I highly recommend you check that out. It sounds like, from what I've understood, we've done over 40 episodes of this podcast and interviewed a lot of really inspirational individuals. And this sounds like one of the best offers that I've heard that is free and out there. So go ahead and check it out. Please sign up, take that, and understand the pitfalls of your business so you can adapt accordingly. And so, Dre, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an amazing podcast, and really enjoyed getting to know you and hearing about your story. So, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, John. This was fun, and wish you all the success with the ongoing elements of the podcast. The people you got, had a great lineup so far. So, well done, my friend.
Thank you.